buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
The Michael Dukes Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Dukes Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead hands.
Friday.
Take my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, this is for fun.
Firearms Friday.
Firearms Friday. Your chance to sound off on issues of a two-way nature. That's right. It's the one day a week that we dedicate to discussions of the Second Amendment, gun rights, firearms news, and so much more. As we like to say, thank goodness it's Firearms Friday, TGIFF, or finally TGIFFF, or TGIFFF, which I can't even say on the air. All right, hey, welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Dukes Show. And I want to thank you for joining me today, whether it's on the plain old regular terrestrial radio, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator, or whether you're joining me on the internet through the audio-only live stream, or one of the many simulcasts, since we're broadcasting this also on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch as well. Good morning to all of you. All of you. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. News break. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Now, normally Firearms Friday is kind of my chill, relaxing day, but today could be the day that I get wound up because, boy, there are some stories where people just seem to be itching for a fight. And I'm talking like fight, like, oh man, so much crazy stuff going on. Gun show in Sterling, Saturday and Sunday, 10 to 4, says Jeannie. Just a note. Okay, so we'll tell you more about that. I'll get some details on it from somebody down there. And who knows what. Little crisp, little cool this morning, but that's because the clouds have peeled back yesterday. Oh man, did it get nice yesterday afternoon. It got beautiful sunny day. Looks like today is going to be the same. I could see the little sliver of blue sky out between I got my drapes closed here in my studio. I could just see this little sliver of blue sky. It's going to be nice today. Finally, down in South Central, a nice weekend. Don't know exactly what's going on in the rest of the state right now, but I'm sure somebody will fill me in on it from the peninsula down all the way down into Homer, all the way up to Fairbanks. We'll know what's going on here as we go through the program this morning. All right, so Firearms Friday, again, a chance to sound off and discuss and talk about the state of the state of the world, the state of the nation when it comes to firearms ownership. And you may say, well, why, Mike? Why do you don't care usually about national stuff. You can't do anything. Yeah, but this is the one thing that I just refuse to let go of. I may have given up on most of the other national politics simply because I just don't feel like we can make a difference on it. But this one is too near and dear to my heart. I've got to keep fighting on this one because, it's interesting. In the history of America, firearms played a pivotal role. Not just in the foundation of the nation, not just in the foundation of the country, but of course, in the growth of the country. Sorry, I got cat hair on me. The growth of the country, the westward expansion, the manifest destiny of people traversing the United States with a dream and a prayer of making a better life for themselves. where there was no civilization, where they, in fact, were responsible for their own safety, their own protection, and so much more. It is definitely a pivotal part, an integral part. Integral. How do you say it? I say integral, but I know some people say integral. I don't. Either way, it was a very important part. It was a very important part of the formation of the country, not only the creation of it, but later on, again, that expansion. And it is something that is uniquely American. Now, that may mean that the rest of the world looks at you like you're a little bit crazy, right? I have had discussions with people from other countries when they find out what I do, and we get down into the weeds on it, and they start talking about it, and I mention Firearms Friday, and they'll be like, yeah, you Americans and your obsession with firearms, we just don't understand it. To which I politely say, and that's why we became a free country, because you don't understand it, because you are willing to basically, bow down to a king or a government, a parliament, a dictator, a monarch, a tyrant, a king, whatever it is. And Americans had enough of it. And the founders were smart enough to understand that the only way that, that we were going to be able to continue to protect ourselves. Because here's the thing. You can agree or disagree with many of the things and many of the beliefs that the founders had, the foibles. I mean, first thing you always hear is when you start talking about the founders and stuff, they're like, well, Jefferson was a slaveholder and Washington hid his slaves so they wouldn't have to. I mean, there's always, they were flawed individuals. All right. Let's just first put that on the table. Sure. They had their problems. They had their mistakes. But overall, they were pretty smart guys. They understood history. They understood the nature of things. They understood the nature of government. That's why you see so many writings from people like Madison and Jefferson and Adams and everyone else talking about the dangers of governance. They were concerned about it. They were worried. The amendments were put in there. The Bill of Rights was actually put together later on in the game, because they understood that as perfect a document as they had in the Constitution, or as good as a document that they had in the Constitution, there would still be ways for people in power to try and work those things around. And so they tried to future-proof that by putting the Bill of Rights in there and delineating specifically what the government it could or could not do. You see, it's a restriction. Here's the thing: the Bill of Rights is not really for you or me specifically. It's built as a prescriptive restriction on government. It orders. It doesn't say you should be free. It doesn't say you should have this right. It doesn't say any of those things. What it does, it says shall not be infringed. That the right of the people it is a restrictive document on government. And I got to tell you, bureaucrats from 1813 on have been trying to find ways around that stuff, because that is just the nature of government. It is the nature of bureaucracy. It is the nature of people. It is, so many different things. Nick Begich, who was on the program yesterday, made a comment that I let go in passing, but I had to chuckle because he was talking about the makeup of different politicians, and we were talking about politicians in Congress and how they were just ignoring, the warning signs of the debt and the spending and everything else. And he said, and some of them are just have, this psychotic narcissistic syndrome kind of thing. And that is really the case throughout history. You can look at those people. There are very few politicians or leaders throughout history who have been, what I would consider to be selfless statesmen, kind of things like that. It is about the pursuit of power. It is about the pursuit of self-aggrandizement. It is about many of those things that in the long run, maybe it doesn't always start out that way, but it eventually ends up kind of being that way. And of course, power begets more power. And bureaucracies, by their very nature, have a tendency to grow. I'm trying to think of who it was that it wasn't Bastiat. It was Descartes. I can't remember who it was now. They actually there was a treatise about bureaucracy. One of the French philosophers was talking about the nature of, I'll have to go look that up now. I can't remember who it was, but it was basically talking about that this is just the nature of government, that it will grow. And they knew that. The founders, again, going back to the founders, they were pretty smart guys. They understood that. Hence the reason why number 2 in the Bill of Rights, I always look at them as almost in order of importance. You have to have the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. But then you got to back it up. You got to back up all these rights. As it says in the beginning of the theme song for the show, the right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all, because it is the one thing that backs it up. And that's what the framers talk about. And then you hear the quote from Jefferson about watering the tree of liberty with the blood of patriots and tyrants and all this kind of stuff. And people go, "Oh, that was just," but I think what he's basically saying is it's a warning to people to understand that is what that is kind of the warning of government is going to grow. And you have to shake up the train every now and then to remind them that this is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not by the government, for the government. I mean, that's not what it's about. But, we've seen the idea of America be turned on its head. We've seen the idea that all power that flows to the federal government should flow from the states. I've often said that, in the beginning, the the distribution of power in the United States looked like a funnel, right? Just picture a big wide funnel, and across the top of the funnel, the big wide end of it, is all the 13 states that were there, and any power that they wanted to they passed it down to the federal government, and then the government could only exercise those powers that were relegated or given to them, or basically given to them by the Constitution, or empowered to them by the states. Then, of course, we plod along for, 60, 70, 80 years, and then the Civil War takes place, and that funnel gets turned on its head, and now it becomes a pyramid. And now all power instead flows from the federal government down to the states. And that at that point, I could just hear the founders rolling over in their grave at that point, because that was the direct inverse of what they were after. And so we can't argue with it now. I mean, it is what it is. People are, you start talking about things like states' rights and the Western Sagebrush Rebellion and some of these other things where states were trying to stand up to the federal government, and people just look at you crazy like, well, why would you do that? I mean, the government is because that's what was originally intended, that the states have their way. And instead, we've looked to Uncle Sugar more and more and more to solve our problems. I mean, we got the Department of Ed that got created and these national agencies that got created, most of which have no real constitutional, derivative or authority to begin with, other than administrations and Congresses have let them go and created them and then let them just run amok. But now we're starting to see a little bit of a renaissance. And with the changes in the Supreme Court and things like that, we're starting to see, some pushbacks. The EPA versus Sackett was one of them, where the Supreme Court said, you as an agency don't have the authority to do what you're doing. You don't have the authority to rule that all lands with water on them are wetlands. That's a congressional issue. You should do that. Same thing's going on. Same thing's going on in the ATF with the whole push on bump stocks and arm braces and 3D printed guns and everything else. This expanding definition, this administrative fiat of trying to create laws through administrative, instead of going through the legislative process. And the judges are starting to call them out on it and say, you do not have the constitutional authority to do this without putting it through the legislative process. And so some of these agencies are getting called to heel on. And so I'm a little heartened about what we're seeing. But this whole thing was basically to talk about why firearms are so important in America, because they understood that it was an implicit check on the natural growth of government and bureaucracy. An implicit check, an implied check. It wasn't an overt. Nobody was standing in front of them in a lobby shaking their rifle at them saying, do this or else. It was an implied threat, knowing that if they could only go so far. If they went too far, well, the citizenry may take up arms and have something to say about that. And so that is really what has made America, even with all its warts and blisters and boils and problems and, chaos and polarization and all the bad things that are going on today, we're still the best choice in the world. People are still dying to get in here. We're still the shining example on the hill. It might be a little tarnished, but we're still the shining example on the hill. And I would argue that the reason we are still as free as we are, is because we are an armed populace that could tell the government no. Not that we have, not that I'm threatening that. I'm just saying that is the implicit threat of government overreach being held at bay. From that, we can only push them so far, and then it's done. But there's still dangers out there. There are still dangers out there. People encouraging folks to ignore the Constitution, overturning things, manipulating, perverting what is our right and freedom. We're going to talk about that today. Phone lines are open as well, 907-433-3150. We're going to be back with more of the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
What is that?
Common Sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Well, good morning, my pretties. And your little dog, too. How are you? How are you? What's going on? Whoa, Greg. I just looked down. Greg's like, perverts being perverts. What did I miss? What did I miss? Okay. It's all good. Who isn't a flawed individual, says Brian. Yeah. That's who isn't a flawed individual. That's the case. Who amongst us has not had serious issues or problems or, made grave errors that we later had to correct, or maybe some of us just never corrected it. That's a fair point. Doesn't mean that we're always 100% wrong because we're flawed. In fact, if we had to choose it by flaws, none of us would be right. If that was the way, then nothing would ever get done. We all have our own little foibles and flaws. That's for sure. Jeannie's going to Seward, leaving sunshine for who knows what kind of weather. It's going to be a beautiful day. I'm excited about it. The gun show this weekend is at the Sterling Senior Center. ITS Sterling just took a pile of cars to this. Just look for the pile of cars on the side of the highway. You can't miss it. Okay. Thank you. And this moment in time, our government is pretty much ignoring the Constitution. The day of revolution is nearer by the day. I don't like to think that way. And like I said, I think that there's been a little bit of resurgence, especially in the courts, where they're basically going back and saying, no, look at the historical perspective. The Bruin decision is a bellwether decision, not just for firearms rights, but back to the more constructionalist part of the Constitution to basically say this is what they intended. And I think that that's a good thing. And again, the Supreme Court ruling on the EPA versus Sackett, the Supreme Court ruling, on Bruin, the Fifth Circuit Court rulings on the ghost gun parts and the arm braces and the bump stocks and things like that, where they have deemed that these agencies just do not have the power. See, this is all about assumption. People just assume that because the president or whatever says that, well, this is what it is, they have been conditioned to believe, well, the government's always right. It's got to be. Although you could point to history, even in the last 60 years of history, at points where the government has been horrifically, catastrophically wrong. And yet this is another case where the courts are now saying, you don't have the authority per the Constitution to do that. So there are some things changing, and I like that. I like that very much so. Can we please have a president with fewer flaws? I haven't seen, I'll be honest with you, Donna, I haven't seen one from this batch yet that has fewer flaws. I mean, some have fewer flaws than others, but oof, man, that's all I'm saying. And now Harold is pro-Trump. I didn't know that. Harold is now pro-Trump. So apparently he changed his mind again. Amen. The world is so wacky. I want a president that isn't in the news every day. It's funny because Calvin Coolidge was one of the most laid back, quiet presidents out there. And he did a lot. If you look at his history as a president, and they asked him about it one time, and he was basically like, he kind of wanted, I just want to take care of business and let it lay back and go. I mean, why can't we all be Calvin Coolidge in that regard? Anyway, it's an interesting thing. All right. We are ready to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty base, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do the stars, super chats on YouTube or super stickers or whatever on you. Just whatever you feel like. Come on down. Let's get more folks involved in the conversation, shall we? Well, it's a whole nother thing. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next break. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Well, it's now that I've given you I mean, sometimes I open my mouth and I'm just never quite sure what's going to come out. I was planning on doing something a little different, but then once I got on a tear, I'm just like, oh, well, I got to tell you all about this. I got to give you the history lesson. I got to talk about the thing. And, and I'm trying to weave together. Again, I love history and I'm a student of history. And so I'm trying to weave my beliefs and philosophies into the story to say, this is what history says, and this is what I believe it means. I mean, that's why, again, firearms are a uniquely American ideal, because we grew up with it as a nation. Some of us actually grew up with it in that. But I mean, as a nation, we grew up that way. And that's why we're so American. I mean, I don't even know how to say that anymore. I mean, we are a different critter. Even today, as divided as we are, and, with 27 genders and all that, we are a unique batch of folks. We're the same nation that we could be as divided as we want to be, but the moment that there's an external threat and things come in, it's like the whole band of the hand thing, right? Anybody else remember Band of the Hand? It's the we're five individuals, but when the time comes, we close together like a fist and we strike kind of thing. It's that kind of ideal. We're rugged individualists, but we can pull together in times of crisis. We are rugged individuals, but we can come together when it's important. And like I said, we're still the best. I mean, there's not many other places in the world where people are dying to get into it. Not many. Not many that I can really, can get into. But here we are. And yet there are still people that want to blow that all straight to hell. And we're going to talk about that here. There's a new report out from some law professors, a forthcoming paper from the Notre Dame Law Review Reflection. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some new shenanigans from the ATF. The ATF seems to be back to their old tricks of the a la Ruby Ridge and Waco old tricks. They've been very quiet for many years on the whole, professional raid front and stuff like that. But we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Also, country music. Who thought country music could be so divisive in so many ways? There's a whole story on that. New Zealand, which along with Australia is being held up as the bastion. I mean, this is what we want, right? I mean, that's what they always say. We should just follow Australia's example. And then later on, after the Christchurch shooting, where New Zealand went just absolutely just ape poo bananas and basically outlawed everything. And then they're like, oh, we should follow New Zealand's example. That still didn't stop what happened. Still didn't stop what happened on Thursday, which was another mass shooting in New Zealand. We'll get into details on that. Massachusetts, those people have lost their ever-loving minds over in Massachusetts. I mean, is this the whole, what's the pejorative, the mass holes? I mean, that's what they're saying is Massachusetts, that place. They've got a whole new law, gun regime that they're trying to put forward after brewing that many of the pro-gun folks are calling the Lawful Citizens Imprisonment Act. They're imprisoning lawful citizens, but forget about forget about the criminals. It's just the lawful citizens. But let's talk for just a minute about what we hear all the time. What do we hear all the time about gun control? Right? What's one of the common themes or the thematic thing that we keep hearing from the news media and the talking heads and everything else? Anybody in the chat room, you guys write that down. You guys tell me what you think is the one thing that you keep hearing. What is the one thing that the news media, especially over the last 8, 9, 10 years, has repeatedly hammered on about gun control? When they're doing their newscasts and their broadcasts and they're talking about the benefits of gun control and everything else, what is the one thing that they keep pointing out in those news stories? I mean, really about almost anything to do with guns. What do they keep pointing out over and over and over again? The one thing that they seem to keep pointing out and that we keep hearing and that I keep finding very hard to believe is the fact that they say all these gun measures are supported by a majority of the people. All the polling shows that every American is in support of gun control and universal background checks and assault weapons bans and all these things. They're all in favor of it. The only way that they don't get passed is the damn MRA. Those NRA, they're holding up the whole world. My God, I mean, you really think one organization, even one as large as the NRA, is going to be able to stop, you think that that's really it? But that's what we've heard, right? Especially over the last 10 years, that, more and more support, even Republicans, when polled, support the yada, yada. We keep hearing that over and over and over again. that somehow there's a new poll saying that gun control of some type or another is popular and that people really want anti-Second Amendment regulations. But the truth is that gun control doesn't pass because no one really wants it. And see, polling in some ways is easy because when you start asking questions about things like, should there be background checks? Should there be mental health checks? In general, people will say yes. John Lott and Thomas Massey wrote an opinion piece here earlier this year talking about that there is no firm, sustained support for gun control. He says a frequent talking point in the gun control debate is that Americans are overwhelmingly support common sense gun control measures like universal background checks and red flag laws. Gun control advocates claim that over 90% of Americans support universal background checks that would require checks for privately exchanged firearms. PolitiFact and Snopes and they all support those claims. Then why won't Congress pass a background check? Well, then, of course, they say, well, it's the NRA. But see, let's go back to 2016. Despite Michael Bloomberg's and his Everytown billion-dollar financing of all these ballot measures, ballot initiatives for universal background checks in Maine failed by over 4%. And one in Nevada by less than 1%. And in Maine and Nevada, the background check initiatives had millions of dollars poured into them and media outlets who were sympathetic to that whole cause. So, but if in Maine it was so great, why didn't it pass? Well, so Lott and Massey get down into it and they take a look at this and they said, if the surveys conducted by gun control advocates were accurate, these should have been easy wins because they keep saying 90% of the people support gun control, right? But surveys often ask just a very simple question, such as, do you support or oppose requiring background checks on all gun sales and transfers? The actual laws could be dozens of pages long, but they're asking a single sentence about dozens of pages and far more, complicated issues. So CPRC, the Crime Prevention Research Center, which is John Lott is the president of, they hired McLaughlin and Associates to survey 1,000 likely voters from February 17th to February 22nd of this year. And when asked if they support background checks on all gun sales or transfers, likely voters expressed support a whopping 86 to 11%. So there's your close to 90% margin, right? Those who strongly supported the policy outnumbered those who strongly opposed. Then 2 follow-up questions were asked. The first was, these laws are called universal background checks. Let's say a stalker is threatening a female friend of yours late on a Saturday night. She asks if she can borrow your handgun until she has a chance to buy one. She is trained and has no criminal record. If you loaned her the gun, this law would make you a felon. Would you support or oppose the law? Well, that's a whole different ball of wax, isn't it? Now, respondents opposed background checks, 44 to 42%. Now, Democrats, they were strongly supported the laws. Republicans were opposed, but in the back, 44 to 42%. Then they offered a second question, a second scenario. A Boy Scout troop is going for his skeet shooting badges. If you lend the Scoutmaster your shotguns, you would be committing a felony. Would you support or oppose this law? They now opposed it 45% with a similar demographic breakdown. Then they went on to talk about red flag laws, and they talked about what red flag laws were and what was involuntary commitment, because all 50 states have involuntary commitment laws. And when they got down to it, first of all, the Americans were supporting such laws 2-1 or 3-1. But when they started to talk about the difference between red flag laws and involuntary commitment laws, where they were told that there were no court proceedings before the guns were taken away and that there were no mental health care experts involved in the entire process, they opposed it 47 to 29%. going from 3-1 in favor to well over 2-1 opposed. And they were asked if they preferred involuntary commitment laws or red flag laws, but they were told that the involuntary commitment laws provided for evaluations by mental health experts, a court hearing before a judge, a lawyer's provided, there's a less extreme range of options, and all this other kind of stuff. And the respondents favored the involuntary commitment laws over red flag laws by basically 40-33. So, see, it's all about what questions you ask and how you ask the questions. You want to know why we don't have more gun laws if 90% of the people support them, as the constant refrain, 80 to 90%. It's because the basic tweetable question is one thing, but when you get down into this very complex issue, there's a lot more to it. Anyway, next time we have Dr. Lott on the program, we will we'll discuss this one specifically because this is an interesting case study. All right, we're up against the break. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Phone lines are open, by the way. I don't know if I said that earlier, but I've got the phone lines up and running. 907-433-3150. If you would like to sound off today on this beautiful Firearms Friday, we'd love to hear from you. Up next, the shenanigans from the ATF. Oh, prepare to get heated. We're going to talk about that on the other side. It's Firearms Friday.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Ooh, man, I get on a rant and a tear today. Let me go back over here to the chat room. Okay. I listened, but it's more close to the term. I was okay. Shall not be infringed isn't ambiguous to us, says Donna. Nope, that pretty much lays it right out there. All right, pretty much all the alphabet. Pretty much all of the alphabet government groups are chock full of shenanigans, said Greg. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean, the FBI used to be one of the most respected institutions in the world for their honor and commitment and neutrality and everything else, for the most part. And it's just, I mean, it's become a laughing stock in many ways right there. They don't call them massholes for nothing, says Bill. That's exactly it. I mean, this whole thing in Massachusetts, I mean, if we get I'm hoping we get enough time to read into this. I might get stuck on this other stuff. But yeah, the gun rights groups are calling it the Lawful Citizens Imprisonment Act because it literally could put anybody behind bars. And this is in light of Brew. I just don't know how they think that's, it's like these organizations are doing it just to spite everyone. And of course, the person who has to pay for all that is the citizen who's caught in the middle. The legislators don't care. They'll pass the law because they don't have to pay to defend it or fight against it or to prosecute it. The government's got all the money in that case. The state will have all the money in that case. And what you'll do is you'll bankrupt some, common citizen to try and fight it all the way up to the Supreme Court. I mean, taking a case to the Supreme Court is not, John Sturgeon spent $2 million getting his case to the Supreme Court that he eventually won. I don't think that there's any relief on that. I don't think that there's any legal fee relief in most of those cases. So, you're going to spend, a couple life savings trying to get to it. So that's why they do it. It's punitive at that point. That's why they do it, because They're pissed off and they want to have their laws and get things their way. And so they do it and say, well, it may be unconstitutional, but you're going to have to take this up in the courts and it's going to cost you gazillions of dollars to defend it. It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. So much for your oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. When the Supreme Court said, this is what the Constitution means, and you say, I don't think it means that, so I'm going to do something completely different. So much for your, rule of law of the land kind of thing. Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. All right. Yeah, what else are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Jason Aldean. Jason Aldean. Who thought that? I mean, I'm not a fan of country music. I recognize some of the names, but I don't listen to country music. It's just not my thing. But Jason Aldean, it's got this song called Try That in a Small Town. And Shannon Watts, the Million Mom March, who I thought was retiring. I thought she was had decided she was going to pass the torch to somebody else, but apparently not. Because how else is she going to get her daily dose of dopamine for being the justice warrior that she is? Anyway, we're going to talk about this song and this story and everything. I mean, I thought this was going to be like a one-of thing, but it just keeps going. It just keeps going. She's trying to get him canceled. He was on this whole thing. It's just, they just don't like it, man. They just don't like it. So what? I don't care if you don't like it. That's what I would say. But I'm not Jason Aldean. Although I don't think he's probably hurting for for shekels. He's probably doing okay. Yeah, they tried that in a small town. Remember Kenosha? Yeah, that's the. I mean, remember, you don't see most of these things happening in small communities because it's just a different feel. It's a different flavor. I mean, it's not even really about guns. It's more about that sense of community. Although it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. It's not nearly as strong as that sense of community as it used to be growing up. Not that it was ever really Mayberry, but it did have more of that Mayberry feel in the past. So, all right, let's continue the Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Let's do it. Here we go. Okay. So, we're ready to talk about this. There's a couple big topics that there's a couple things that I really want to get to. But first and foremost, we need to point out that the ATF is back to their old tricks. 30 years have passed since Waco. But it's really still relevant in people's mind. Waco is still, Ruby Ridge. All these different things, these raids, these botched raids that have been carried out by the ATF. Now we're seeing more and more of these. First we started hearing about the compliance checks and the other things and all this other stuff. And then we heard about the raid in where was it? The raid in Highwood in Great Falls, Montana, the Highwood Creek Outfitters, where now the ATF in these raids is now joining up with the IRS. There was a joint I mean, this is part of that $80 million or $80 billion that they gave to the IRS, right? So the IRS has a tactical unit now. And so the ATF and the IRS got a tactical, they have a combined, joined, task force tactical team, and they raided this gun store in Great Falls, Montana. Interestingly enough, the ATF agents were prohibited by law from seizing the gun shop's 4473 forms, which are the forms you fill out when you buy a gun. So the IRS agents took them. Now, they didn't have any lawful authority to do so, but apparently they're less likely to get in trouble than the ATF is on something like that. So they seized thousands of forms and took them all. We talked a little bit about this raid before, but I mean, this thing is just like, this is an outfit that has never had any real problems. They had a few minor paperwork errors, and they were trying to get them corrected. They were trying to, this is like, but there has become a zero tolerance policy from the Biden administration. And in fact, the number of FFLs that have disappeared since Biden took office and has been directing the ATF to have this zero tolerance policy, the number of FFLs are plummeting in this country. And again, for simple paperwork, if you've listened to this program for a long time, you'll remember Red's Trading Post in Twin Falls, Idaho. Red's was a good friend of the show. Ryan Horsley was a friend of mine, and he was talking about this, and they were under complete and total scrutiny from the IRS, from the ATF, because of simple. Instead of putting a yes in a box, they put Y. Instead of putting no in a box, they put N. It was like saying, instead of writing out Fairbanks North Star Borough as your county of record, somebody would put FNSB. That could trigger a paperwork violation from the ATF. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. If you didn't dot a T or cross an I, you know what I mean? They could say that you were breaking federal law. Now, this is the same organization that has lost thousands of guns over just the last 10 years. And of course was involved in things like the Gunwalker scandal and all this Fast and Furious and all that stuff. But if you make a simple paperwork violation, if you transpose a number, if you abbreviate instead of writing it all out, you would be in serious trouble. So that Highwood Creek one was kind of the first, like, wow, are the ATF raids starting up again? Well, possibly. Probably. Russell Fincher is a high school history teacher, a Baptist pastor, and a part-time gun dealer. He coaches Little League in his hometown of Tuscaloosa, Oklahoma, and which has a population of about 150 people. He's had a federal firearms license for 3 years. He has no brick-and-mortar gun shop. He's what used to be called a kitchen table FFL. He sells most of his firearms at gun shows. In April, he received a call from the ATF. They said they wanted to do an inspection of his home, and he said, I told them they're welcome anytime. 2 inspectors arrived a few days later. They spent 3 hours at the home. They took pictures of his 4473s, which he later learned is illegal, although it's a common practice. And he said they were nicer than I expected. They said I had some guns that had traces on them, which concerned them, and it concerned me too, meaning gun traces. They returned 2 weeks later. They had some concerns involving Fincher's penmanship, which they couldn't read on a couple of forms. Again, right? The zero tolerance for, I couldn't read your handwriting. They also found that he had juxtaposed a model number of a firearm with a weapon serial number. So he accidentally put them in the different boxes. Again, a simple clerical error. Like the government has never had a clerical error. He was attempting to fix that. Then on June 16th, Fincher and his son were packing for a gun show in Tulsa when the phone rang. It was the ATF. They said they wanted to talk to him before he left for the gun show. He said, well, you can come to our house. I told him, he says, we can come out to your house. He said, sure. I told him, sure, I'd be home. 7 vehicles roared up to his house, disgorged a dozen ATF agents wearing full battle rattle, all armed with AR-15s. And he said they called him out on his deck, handcuffed him in front of his 13-year-old son, held him on the deck for an hour. He was surrounded by agents. One by one, they yelled at him about what he was doing. He said, in my mind, I decided if they were going to beat me up over every little thing, I'm done. As soon as I said, if you want my FFL, you can have it, one of the agents pulled out a piece of paper and said, well, then sign here. He had made 3 copies in case I screwed one up. It was exactly what they wanted, he said. I was shocked. As soon as he relinquished his FFL, the ATF began loading up his guns, including his Colt Combat Commander, Glocks, a Mint AK. They said they took more than 50 of my personal guns. When I asked them why, they said they were evidence. He estimated they took about $60,000 worth of guns. Then, after the ATF SWAT cleared Fincher's home, they called in the agent in charge for the raid and told him it was safe to come up. This is the guy that had invited them over. He said Special Agent Theodore Mongol, who was the agent in charge, came up and said, you're done. We've shut you down. You tell all your FFL buddies we're coming for them. We're shutting the gun shows down. Fincher said one agent told him that they hate home FFLs. He said, if I wanted to sell a Browning shotgun to someone at a gun show with no paperwork, that's no problem. But when I sell a Glock or an AR lower, that's a gangbanger. I asked him, he said, where does it say that in the regs? He said, no gangbanger would be shooting people with a $2,000 Benelli. I mean, several agents accused Fincher of making too much money through his gun show sales. He told them at the last gun show he attended, he only sold $75 worth of ammunition and spent $1,200 on hotels, tables, food, and gas. Fincher was told to load the firearms the ATF didn't want back in his pickup, which he later took to another FFL. He asked the special agent in charge about the guns that they had seized. He told me, if you're willing to forfeit them, we can make a lot of this go away. This is a shakedown. What are you going to, this is insanity. I just have a warning. I have a warning. You're going to push the wrong person into the corner. And it's not going to end well for anyone involved. The guy invites you up to his house and you show up in full force like it's a no-knock raid, and then badger him until he says, this is not worth it, relinquishes his FFL, and then steal his personal guns, which have nothing to do with his FFL. So much outrage over this. We got to go. Hour 2 dead ahead. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Yeah, this is, that is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Can you avoid acronyms? I used the names of the IRS. I mean, I'm hoping everybody knows who the IRS is, and I'm hoping everybody knows who the ATF is. And I said Federal Firearms License before I said FFL. If they can't figure it out, Harold, sorry. Makes me want to watch an episode of Reacher. Yeah, I mean, pretty much at this point. I mean, this is what kills me. They call him and say, we want to talk to you before you go to the gun show. Sure, come on up. We're at the house right now. And then they roar up in the thing, all badass and bullying, and then said, we've shut you down. You tell all your FFL buddies that we're, what the? ATF is at it again. ATF at it, up to their old tricks, up to their old shenanigans. Basically the whole thing is a shakedown. The whole thing is a shakedown. And taking his personal fire. And for those of you who don't know, when you're an FFL, a federal firearms licensee, there are two very separate things, and you have to make sure that you keep them very separate. There are the guns that are on your book, your FFL book, which is the log book that you log in and log out firearms that you receive and sell, and those kind of things. And then there are your own private firearms, which those are. You shouldn't be selling private firearms as an FFL, right? That's they're very separate. But when they come in and take 50 of your personal guns, that's insane. It's nuts. They took his 1906 Winchester. He had a Winchester 1906 22 rifle. And they took that. Wow, there's a whole list of this. I'll post this whole story up here. You guys can read this. This is from Substack. Yeah. Did they shoot the dog? No, they didn't shoot the dog this time. I mean, that's a whole thing later on, but the state is not your friend, says Brian. Yeah, that's pretty much pretty much it. Let's see. A lot of banter going on here. I will never forget Ruby Ridge or when they killed Lavoy Finicum. Small towns are all about FAFO, which is fool around and find out. Not fool, but you know what I mean. Frick around and find out. That's what that's all about. Jason Aldean, freedom of speech. Remember how Coeur d'Alene reacted to BLM? I do remember some of that, a little bit of that. Yeah, it's some crazy stuff. I thought we really had this. Will they be giving them back? Doubtful. If so, I mean, they will drag their feet. They'll be punitive about this. I mean, it may take him years to get those firearms back, if he ever does. Remember, the last thing they said is if you just release those, if you just surrender those, we could go a long way to clearing to, I mean, they haven't even charged him with anything. But now they're saying, it's all bullying tactics. Makes me wonder about the caliber of people that are being recruited and hired by the ATF. Terry Hayes said that I had 3 separate safes when I had my FFL, 1 for business and 2 for personal arms just for that reason. Exactly. You could not mix and mingle. You do. That's like new. Yeah. It is. Yeah, it's a spooky time. I'll be honest with you. That's why I explored getting an FFL for a couple of years. I thought about it. And I had to think long and hard about it. And I talked to friends who had FFLs, other dealers, and things like that. Because, I mean, I've been a part of the firearms world since I was a kid. And I finally decided, no, I just didn't want to open myself up to any potential, especially since for a few years there, I was consistently spending every Firearms Friday banging on the ATF like hard. So much so that I was later told by somebody who worked in law enforcement that apparently the local ATF guys would listen to the show every Friday and take notes, like they were like they were going to come, talk to me and ask me some questions, kind of thing, So I decided that no, I'm not going to have an FFL because no. Too many opportunities, like you said, for a simple paperwork. We didn't understand your handwriting. And so therefore you're now a problem. Definitely a oof. All right. Well, I guess we will get things going on here. Hour 2 is dead ahead. Willie Waffle's coming up at the end of the show. And I still want to talk about Jason Aldean. Oh, and these law professors. These guys. Ooh, my head's going to explode. All right, we're going to talk about that. Harold, Shut up. Can we get a guest? Sure, call in. We'll talk to you. That'll be fun.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
The Michael Dukes Show.
I have 2 guns, one for each of you.
Firearms Friday.
As Thomas Jefferson stated, it is the right and duty of the people to be at all times armed.
Say hello to my little friend.
I say that the Second Amendment is, in order of importance, the First Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is the one right that allows rights to exist at all.
The Michael Dukes Show. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Firearms.
From my cold, dead hands.
Friday.
Here's my rifle, this is my gun. This is for fighting, it's for fun.
Firearms Friday.
Firearms Friday, your chance to sound off on issues of a two-way nature right here on the Michael Dukes Show. Welcome to it, hour 2 of the big radio broadcast, and we are ready. Look at that blue sky. Look at that sunshine. What is that thing? Is that a UFO? Oh, it's the sun. Never mind. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful day, and I hope you are ready for it. I hope you're enjoying it for this go around the sun here on today's deal. Firearms Friday, of course, is our chance to sound off on issues of a 2A nature, and we have got lots of good stuff to talk about. Lots and lots of good stuff to talk about related to firearms and the Second Amendment. Then we're going to finish up the show this morning with our friend Willie Waffle from wafflemovies.com, who's going to come in here and share with us his weekend entertainment review. It'll be fun. And I guess that's it. That's all I have today. Oh, the phone lines are open. 907-433-3150. We'll do gun Q&A, too, if you guys want to talk about that as well. We just finished up talking about the ATF apparently starting to ramp up their raid machine again, where they're kicking in doors and knocking people over and shooting dogs and doing all the things that they normally do that they kind of slowed down on in the last few years. Apparently, the muzzle's off again, and they are out and about on this thing. I'm going to let that one go for now, but if you missed the first hour today, you may want to go back and listen on the podcast or on the replay on Facebook, because oof, baby, oof. Interesting article. Lee Williams over at Substack, the gun writer at Substack, has got the story about the use of excessive force and just the Gestapo-like tactics. I don't normally compare. I don't usually do the whole, what is that? It's called the, where you end up comparing everything to Nazis. And I can't remember what it's actually the Williamson's law or something, where every argument devolves into comparisons to Nazis. But in this case, yes, I will compare it to Gestapo tactics of this blitzkrieg lightning raid, even after they called and said, we want to talk to you. And he's like, come on up to the house. I'm here right now. And they show up and, want to kick his door down, put him in handcuffs in front of his son, with all battle rattle. Anyway, it's a whole thing. I'm done talking about it. It's a whole thing. What else we got? Well, Jason Aldean, again, I'm not a country music fan. Country music's fine. Don't get me wrong. I just don't listen to it. It's not like it's my thing. But apparently he made headlines earlier this week when he wrote a song, which, by the way, has been out since May. The song's been out since May. But apparently it caught some people's attention. The name of the song is Try That in a Small Town. And Shannon Watts from Moms Deserve a Million Mom, the every time, and the anti-gun queen. You know what I'm talking about. She is out there actively trying to get Aldine canceled. This song was recently pulled off of CMT, which I think is that country music television? Is that like VH1 or is MTV? Anyway, it was pulled out of rotation on CMT, and Shannon Watts is claiming credit for the move and is now trying to get the singer canceled from a fundraiser benefiting Covenant School in Nashville. And this whole thing is it's gone crazy. This was what I thought most of us thought would probably be a 1 or 2 day little blip on the news cycle, and it just keeps going. Aldine has been accused of fostering racism and violence with his lyrics, even as the singer himself has pushed back. He said, in the past 24 hours, I've been accused of releasing a pro-lynching song and was the subject of the comparison that I was not too pleased with the nationwide BLM movements. These references are not only meritless, but dangerous. There's not a single lyric in the song that references race or points to it. There isn't a single video clip that isn't real news footage. And while I can try and respect others to have their own interpretation of a song or music, this goes too far. Now, some were offended by the lyrics, especially since Aldine was on stage during the Las Vegas shooting. He was actually on stage when the shooting started. Try that in a small town. For me, this is what he says, refers to the feeling of community that I had growing up, where we took care of our neighbors, regardless of differences or backgrounds or belief, because they were neighbors, and that was above any difference. My political view has never been something I've hidden from, and I know that for a lot of us in this country, we don't agree on how we get back to a sense of normalcy, where we go at least a day without a headline that keeps us up at night, but the desire for it, that's what this song is about. Shannon Watts just will not let it go and keeps going on and on about it, especially what she here's what she says in a tweet. Jason Aldean, who was on stage during the mass shooting in Las Vegas in 2017 that killed 60 people, has recorded a song called Try That in a Small Town about how he and his friends will shoot you if you try and take their guns. I don't see how the two are related, quite honestly. I don't see how, just because he was on stage during the events of the shooting, I don't see how. Anyway, here's the lyrics. Try that in a small town. Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're going to round up. Well, that stuff might not fly in the city. That stuff might fly in the city. Good luck. Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Over here, we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't try that in a small town. Full of good old boys raised up right. If you're looking for a fight, try that in a small town. I mean, that's just one section of this whole thing. And she was all about Jason Aldean because right after the shooting in Las Vegas, he said it was too easy to get guns in the U.S. That was one of his comments. So she never had a problem with him up until the point he wrote this song about try taking away our guns in a small town. And now she's out full. She's all catfighty about it. Anyway, the one thing that they do, of course, is the anti-gun advocates get all wound up about all the small town songs, and about the things that are happening in the small town, and they completely ignore what's going on in the big city. For example, in gun control friendly regimes like DC, they get violent crime and they just don't even know how to deal with it, including with juveniles. Like this kid. In early June, DC prosecutors dismissed charges against a notable offender, an 11-year-old who police alleged was responsible for an assault and 2 robberies the previous month. The youth agreed to stay out of Northwest DC and wear an ankle monitor if the probation officer determined it was necessary to resolve the charges. He didn't stay out of the court system for too long, though. On Wednesday, he appeared virtually in court again in connection with another robbery. In less than 2 months, an 11-year-old has been arrested for 3 robberies and an assault. I mean, they dismissed the first 3 charges outright and now appear ready to offer a plea deal to this kid. On June 16th, 11 days after the prior charges were dismissed, He was arrested on charges of armed robbery and carrying a pistol without a license. According to a police report, he and 2 others tried to steal a delivery driver's moped that was parked outside a Chick-fil-A, then threatened to shoot the driver when he objected. Threatened to with a gun. Threatened to shoot him. A D.C. prosecutor said at Wednesday's hearing that the office was working on a possible plea offer with the youth related to new charges, which include robbing while armed, threats to injure a person, and carrying a pistol. Threats to injure. You were threatening him with a gun. Oh God, it just never ends. They won't pay attention to that. What was the other headline for last weekend in Chicago? 40 people shot, 4 deaths, 40 people shot in Chicago, the anti-gun capital of the nation. But don't worry, they're worried about Jason Aldean's song. We got to get that thing canceled right now. Right freaking now. And finally, this story is going to carry us into the next segment, I can tell you already. This story makes my head explode. We've talked on this program a little bit about the concept of qualified immunity. We've discussed this with guests from Reason Magazine and other. They have a huge selection of examples of the problem with qualified immunity in this country. Qualified immunity is it's not an old, this is something that was new. This is something that was created by the courts whole cloth in 1967. Qualified immunity basically gives government officials a free pass. It's a shield that it prevents them from basically, it makes it very difficult to hold public officials accountable, especially police officers. Police officers, prison officials, those kind of things, they have had some of the most egregious violations of this law. I mean, I'm talking about things like they literally had a prisoner die, the family in custody, and it turns out that this guy had been living in a cell in his own fecal matter for weeks. And they tried to hold the jailers, the prison officials accountable, and they got qualified immunity. Even though they were there's so many examples of this. People stealing money from lockup that should have known better. Oh, they got qualified immunity because there's a portion of qualified immunity showing that it has to be, well, how did they put it? Qualified immunity offers because it has to have happened before. It has to have had precedent for them to know that it's illegal. That's part of qualified immunity. That's the hinge that this whole thing is rested on for so long. So qualified immunity. So it's a bad precedent. It's a bad thing. It should have been fixed. We've been talking about it for especially the last 5 or 6 years. It's really gotten some real headlines because more and more officers are behaving badly about it. And now you've got a brand new forthcoming paper in the Notre Dame Law Review Reflection with Professor Guwa Krishnamurthy from the University of Oklahoma and Professor Peter Salib from the University of Houston. And they have a solution for gun control. And oh, baby, is my head blood shooting right out of my eyes. We're going to tell you about it here on the other side. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I mean, I'm still stuck on this whole 11-year-old who was out. I mean, they dismissed the charges, and 7 days later, he's back in Northwest DC, where he said he wouldn't be threatening a moped driver with a firearm. An 11-year. What the fuck? I mean, what? What? The what? What the what? I mean, and now they're talking a plea deal. I mean, this kid had all the charges dismissed, said he wasn't going to do it, blah, blah, blah. Comes back, he's got a gun, threatens a guy with a gun, and now it's not just attempted murder or threat. I don't know what the official, what would it be if I threatened somebody with a gun? I mean, you know, to shoot them if they didn't give me their stuff. I just, would you think I'd get a plea deal on that? You think that they would give me a plea deal on that? Somehow I don't think so. This 11-year-old repeat offender, though, oh, baby. Yeah. Rick says he thinks it was the video in Godwin's Law. Thank you. It was Godwin's Law, where everything devolves into comparisons to Nazis. I think it was the video more than the song, said Rick. I haven't seen the video. The video apparently is just news footage, right? That was what was intimated from the article there, was that it's just news footage of what's happening in the big towns. Yeah. Amazing. What? New York pays $13 million to protesters arrested during the George Floyd protests. Riot, burn, loot, attack the police, and get paid by Democrats to do it all over again with no consequences. Well, wow. Okay. David Allen Coe. Video shows what's happening in the big cities. And 11 years old. Yeah, I mean, 11 years old. This kid is the more I read about it, the more my, where is it here? Let me go back up to it. The big city crime. Here it is. This story, you just start reading it. According to the Washington Post, during Wednesday's hearing, the child probation officers informed the judge that the 11-year-old's mother says her son is abusing drugs and has been struggling to place him in school because of behavioral issues. Instead of arguing to keep him in custody or placing him in care of the state, the probation officer instead requested that the preteen undergo drug testing, while the judge warned if the situation doesn't improve at some point in the future, he'll have to place the 11-year-old in a shelter. What? I mean, this kid is, juvie. He threatened to shoot somebody with a gun 11 days after prior charges were dismissed. Are you out of your freaking mind? I mean, what? How many felony charges does this kid need to face before the state concludes that the streets is not a good place for this kid? 11 years old. What the actual, I mean, oh, it's so crazy. It's so crazy. Oh, man. All right, we're gonna jump back into it. Here we go. We're about 30 seconds out right now. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow. Do all this stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna have to watch the video. I'm gonna have to watch the video for that. I haven't seen it. We'll see what it goes. All right, here we go. Jumping back in. Let's do it. Right now. Well, almost right now. Actually, right now.
What the hell's an assault weapon?
You know, if we could just figure out how to get all of the murder guns and the attack guns and not keep selling those to people and just sell protection guns, I think that would be great and solve a lot of problems.
Does this mean that if we hurt your feelings, you'd consider the Michael Dukes Show assault radio? Okay, we can live with that. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yep, assault radio. That's what we do. They hurt your feelings. Did I hurt your feelings? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. All right, well, let's get back into this. We were talking about qualified immunity. This forthcoming paper from the Notre Dame Law Review, these two professors, one from Oklahoma, one from Houston, they are actually calling for the abuse of qualified immunity to confiscate guns. Here's an excerpt. The Supreme Court's ruling in Bruin threw the political project of gun regulation into question. It is a political project. Isn't that interesting? The political project of gun regulation into question. Before Bruin, state could enact new kinds of restrictions if they passed a relatively stringent means and test. That is, if laws meaningfully reduce danger while not too heavily burdening the right to self-defense, they were allowed. After Bruin, only gun controls actually enforced in the founding era and their close analogs are permissible. Many fewer regulations will now pass the constitutional test. Here, we suggest an unlikely source of continuing power after Bruin. For states to disarm individuals they deem dangerous, qualified immunity. Qualified immunity shields state officers from monetary liability for many constitutional violations. Thus, a state law enforcement officer may, after Bruin, confiscate an individual's firearm if the officer deems that person too dangerous to possess it. The officer's justifications may conflict with the federal court's understanding of Bruin or the Second Amendment, perhaps flagrantly, but unless a previous authoritative legal decision examining near identical facts say so, the officer risks no liability. And because each individual act of disarmament will be unique, such prior decisions will be vanishingly rare. The result is a surprisingly free hand for states to determine who should and should not be armed, even in contravention of the Supreme Court's dictates. Okay. I mean, okay. And here's the problem with qualified immunity. And they point out that the challenge here. This qualified immunity holds unless a previous authoritative legal decision examining near identical facts say so. And when they say near identical, some of these courts have interpreted it as, you did something on a Tuesday that only somebody has done on a Wednesday before that's been said is unlawful. But because you did it on a Tuesday, it's a whole new case. It's near identical, but it's unique and it's different. So you get qualified immunity. Now, I'm exaggerating slightly, but literally, when you have law enforcement officers or prison officials in this case, where they're letting the guy stew in his own feces, do you really need a previous precedent set saying, you shouldn't let him sit in his own feces, right? Till he dies. I mean, stew in his own poo until but this is the problem with qualified immunity. And now you got these two jackholes who are saying, well, you know what? You can break, and basically saying you're going to break the law. And in fact, it says right there, the justifications may conflict with the federal court's understanding of Bruin or the Second Amendment, perhaps flagrantly. That you can literally bypass the constitutional powers by this idea of qualified immunity. Okay. Are you guys... You guys want to get in a fight? Is that what this is about? I mean, you're up on the ivory tower on the hill expressly saying, I would love to see this paper come out and then some states start to kind of increase their gun takings and then say, come and, qualify immunity. And then somebody come up and say, look, they knew going in This paper, they're following the playbook from this paper. I would love to see what the courts have to say about that, where they are flaunting the court's decision and the Constitution and then saying, well, we have qualified immunity, so you can't do anything to us. I mean, they go on to say, proponents of gun rights who skew conservative may see this as lawlessness. What, you mean arbitrarily ignoring the law and saying you can't do anything about it because we have qualified immunity? I would think that that is the very definition of lawlessness. I mean, if you looked up lawlessness in the dictionary, this would be a prime example of it, don't you think? Proponents of gun rights who skew conservative may see this as lawlessness. In the past, it has been liberals and civil libertarians who have seen qualified immunity that way. Here, as elsewhere in law, what's good sauce for the goose is good for the gander. Gun rights advocates may therefore either accept qualified immunity's implications for their preferred rights or join with their usual adversaries in opposing it everywhere. I don't know one person who is familiar with the concept of qualified immunity that's like, oh yeah, that thing's perfect. We need to keep that. I mean, I don't know anybody that is, I mean, we've talked about the shooting of, Breonna Taylor and Kelly Thomas and the guy in Chicago that was, reaching for his concealed carry license to show the officer and all the, the wrong door raids and everything. I don't know anybody. I mean, Scalia and Clarence Thomas have both openly questioned qualified immunity. These guys are nuttier than squirrel poo. And the worst part is that they're dangerous. They are encouraging states to have their lawful legal representatives, the police, the state police law enforcement officers, go out and intentionally break the law and to go against court precedent, to break to ignore constitutional rights, and then rest on the fact that they can't be prosecuted. What? That's madness. That is absolute insanity. That this is what you're encouraging. I mean, the University of Oklahoma College of Law and the University of Houston Law Center, that's where these professors are from. What? I mean, if they're attorneys, I would question whether or not there's some disbarment issue there that could be brought about, that you were encouraging people you have sworn an oath as an officer of the law to defend and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Now, I know many officers would probably just, give these two guys the fingers, but there are plenty of officers out there who are in it for the kicks, baby. The authoritarian kicks. They love it. They want to do it. They think, don't question me. Don't talk to me that way. Why are you resisting? You know what I mean? There's plenty of guys out there who would do it. They're telling these guys to violate their oath of office for what is a political project of gun regulation. They say that right in the beginning. The Bruin threw the political project of gun regulation into question. This is dangerous. Again, I'm not calling for anything or anything else, but I can see the handwriting on the wall. You will, somebody earlier said, FAFO, you do this, yeah, something's going to happen with the wrong person, and you're going to create a firestorm like you've never believed. Besides the fact that you are, again, encouraging these people to violate their oath of office and then stand behind this qualified immunity shield. So on the one hand, you are violating somebody's constitutional and civil rights. And on the other hand, you're standing behind the shield that the law gives you. And again, at that point, isn't that just Isn't it just two-sided? Isn't it just two-sided at that point? You're trying to play both sides? I mean, I read this thing and my brain locked up, folks. How did we get to this point in America where we have two supposed intellectuals, professors at university? How do they think this is a good idea? I just don't know what to say. I have no words for that. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I was trying not to swear because I can't even wrap my brain around the fact that these guys, again, are two professors at law centers. And this is what, and you guys are talking about pancakes. Why am I even in here? Why am I even in here? You guys are talking about baseball and pancakes. Okay. I guess I'll just shut the chat off and just keep talking because this is just important stuff, right? That's just important stuff. Yep. That's what I'm going to do. All right. I went and refilled my water bottle. You guys talk amongst yourself about waffles. Jesus. I mean, I'm so pissed off right now. It just doesn't even matter. I'm not at you. I'm just this whole story. I mean, the more I read the story, the more I think about it. These guys are, professor emeritus at the law schools, and they're doing all this stuff. And will this even make the news? The mainstream news? Forget about it. And this is where you're sending your kids. These kind of places. University of Oklahoma College of Law and the University of Houston Law Center. And these guys are telling you to violate the Constitution and stand back and be shielded because you're public servants. I'm just going to be honest with you. You're gonna mess around with the wrong person. You're gonna pick on the wrong guy who has had a bad day, who is a combat vet, who's been struggling with PTSD or maybe suicidal ideation or something. Every 22 seconds a veteran kills themselves, right? And you're gonna push the wrong buttons on the wrong guy, and you're gonna kick off something that you don't. Fafo. That's what's going to happen. That's what's coming on. The phone was on, but we got Willie coming up. So phone is off now because we got Willie coming up. I got to turn the phone. Nobody called this morning. Not even Fred. Not even Fred called this morning. But that's okay. I mean, we had a lot of good stories. I'm flabbergasted, folks. I mean, am I out of line? Are any of you, except for those of you who are talking about breakfast foods and baseball, are any of you as flabbergasted and just stymied as I am about this? Again, these guys are they're calling on people to literally not just break the law, because we've seen that before where they just call on, just ignore that kind of. But we're talking about a constitutional right and a Supreme Court decision that fundamentally changes the way that they're supposed to interpret those things. And these guys are just calling for it to be, I got to get ready for Willie. Yeah, my head explodes. Just, and the more I think about it, the more flustered I get, because it's just so crazy. Busy signal, said Greg. Well, I just shut the phones off, Greg. So sorry. I shut the phones off. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Willie's going to be joining us here in just a second. Defund university, says Donna. Yeah. That's good. And Greg says, what if professors had the wheel turned to arresting lawyers for stupidity? Would they change their ideas? How about we just disbar them? Right? I mean, there's some professional ethical questions in this. And if you're an attorney, you've taken an oath to, for ethical behavior. If you're advocating for people to do this kind of, all right, phone's ringing, buzzing. It's time for Willie. We got to jump back into it. Hi, it's the weekend. Now I could talk about movies. I'm happy. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based. All right, the weekend, so close I can taste it. But it wouldn't be the weekend without our weekend movie and entertainment critic, and of course that is Willie Waffle from wafflemovies.com. Good morning, my friend. How is you? How you doing?
Oh, the weekend is on the tip of our tongues, and it tastes so sweet.
So good. So good. All right. Well, we got a lot of news, but it is kind of bad news for those of us that love movies or television shows or streaming, because, man, they are making some changes. They're tuning things up. They're changing the streaming services, the network schedules. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Give me the rundown.
There is complete mayhem in Hollywood right now. Okay, because of the strike, all the different studios, all the television networks are trying to figure out, how are we going to survive this? How are we going to keep making money while the writers and the actors are not making money,
right,
in an attempt to better our bargaining position?
Right.
Well, so here's what's going on. A lot of stuff is just getting delayed. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of these things are getting delayed, A, because you just can't produce new TV shows right now. And B, a lot of the movie studios are going, hey, if the actors aren't going to promote our movies, well, we just can't sink all this extra marketing money into more commercials. It's just we're maxed out there.
Right.
We need these actors to go out there and do these interviews and show up on these TV shows. So Warner Brothers this week is kicking around the idea that their stuff might just be outright pushed out of 2023. And this is funny because I just saw Barbie last night, and they did a big trailer for A Color Purple. This is going to be kind of the musical version of A Color Purple based on the stage play. And now there's consideration. Warner Brothers, which was going to release that at Christmas time, may push it to 2024. Guess what else was coming out at Christmas time that might get pushed to 2024? Aquaman 2. Now, that's partly because they're pushing it for all these reasons. And there was rumors that they're still doing reshoots and stuff. If they can't do reshoots, they can't finish the movie.
Yeah, I just saw today that they just got greenlit by James Gunn for a third round of reshoots. They did the first cut, and it didn't do well at the testing, so they brought the two brain children in or whatever. So they did a second round. It did worse than the first one. And so now James Gunn is given the go-ahead for a third one. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, first of all, Amber Heard is still in it, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But
I think that's going to be a hard sell, baby.
Oh man, it's going to be such a hard sell. And the DC universe is just such a hot mess. But yeah, I mean, how are they going to shoot these retakes if they can't do anything? It's going to be impossible.
Yeah, so now also Dune 2, they're thinking about pushing that into 2024 because they want that all-star cast out there promoting the movie. Now you also look at TV. So on TV, NBC and CBS outright just announced we're trashing our fall schedules. So NBC basically said, yeah, you're just going to get some reruns of all those Chicago shows that you love, but like not like all Wednesday night. Like they're going to take the 8 o'clock hour and like show one of them one week and like one another week and one another week, and then they're going to put in some other programs in place of it. So like, you know, this is really wild. Like, you know, like they have Magnum PI, which was originally supposed to premiere in the winter of 2024. Well, that's already done, so they're going to use that in the fall. Quantum Leap, same deal. We're going to use that in the fall. So now that's your Wednesday night schedule. We've got, you know, one of the Chicago shows and then Magnum PI and Quantum Leap. On Law and Order night, Thursday nights, they're going to bring in some Canadian medical drama called Transplant. They're going to put that in here. Night Court, we'll see you in 2024. You know, Extended Family, we'll see you in 2024. And you know what we've got? We've got The Voice, and they're going to exploit The Voice. You're going to be so sick of seeing The Voice when this is all over because it's going to be on like almost every night, okay? And they're going to have like a 2-hour long version of it. It's going crazy. On CBS, they made the announcement that made my heart flutter because I knew this was going to happen. I told you CBS is going to roll out all their Paramount stuff. Well, Sunday nights on CBS, you will have a chance to watch Yellowstone.
No kidding. Holy cow.
Yep.
Well, they're going
to roll out from season 1, baby.
They're going to have to edit the hell out of that. All right. Well,
yeah. And they're going to bring some other Paramount Plus stuff. Like, you know, if you remember SEAL Team that used to be on CBS, they pushed it to Paramount Plus. Well, it's coming back to CBS. And Ghost, my favorite show. I know you love the show.
Yeah.
They're going to just push that off until 2024. But in the fall, they're going to air Ghosts. The British version that it's based on.
Oh, no kidding. Well,
yeah,
you know,
this is going to be great.
It's so staggering. And here's what kills me is these actors have got to know that this is going to kill. I mean, and I know it's a calculated gamble, but they know that this is going to kill the studios. And you mentioned to me, Tom Cruise is in there actually trying to save this by lobbying the theaters, the studios, and the Actors Guild and Union to work together a little bit. He's trying to allow them to like promote movie because that's a big deal, right? Promoting your own movie is a big deal. And he's trying to get the Actors Union to agree to at least allow them to do that for stuff that's already in the can.
Yeah, you know, Tom Cruise has kind of been like a peacemaker in a way. You know, he met with the negotiating teams on both sides, and he said, "Listen, you know, movie theaters are still hurting. And like, you know, we need to like do something to help them." And he tried to convince SAG-AFTRA union to allow actors to promote their movies so that, you know, these movies would still do well. It would help the movie theaters. Yes, it would help the studios, but it would also help the actors themselves because, you know, when you have a hit movie, your price goes up, your contract for the next movie goes up. In return, he lobbied the movie producers, the movie and television producers group to say, listen, you got to treat the stunt people better. Like, you know, we have some proposals to make sure they get paid better. So he's trying to kind of be in the middle and bring it all together, but it's just a little too early. And there's just a lot of people that just want a little bit of a fight still.
Yeah. Now, what productions are going to continue during the action strike? Because some of them have got waivers, right? They're exempt or whatever. Yeah. So give us the rundown.
So this is wild. So there's the 39 waivers that have been given to independent films that really aren't working with anybody who's associated with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. So Anne Hathaway's still working as she's making the A24 movie Mother Mary. Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega are still working. They're doing Death of a Unicorn, and this is my favorite. Mark Wahlberg and Mel Gibson are still working because Mel Gibson is making an independent film called Flight Risk, and well, Mark is in it. And this is kind of cool. there is a TV production of the Life of Jesus Christ called The Chosen, which is going to be still producing because it's really kind of not affiliated with anybody. Then this is the one that got me, House of the Dragon. That is still allowed to produce. They're still allowed to keep making it because they have a contract with the UK version of the union, and they're not striking.
Yeah, they're not legally allowed to strike, right? With
Yeah,
SAG-AFTRA, right? So that's the
yeah.
government.
There's some weird thing about being a monopoly, so both of them can't like strike at the same time in Britain. It's a very convoluted thing.
Well, there's going to be a little bit of a desert for new entertainment. I guess we'll be watching whatever releases, and I guess we'll be watching a lot of reruns for the next who knows how long. This could go as long as a year, right? I mean, this could go a while.
This could go a while. I mean, early on when people were talking about going on strike, how long could it be? And there were some people who were saying that the strike could last until January. Like you could see Hollywood just shut down and not producing things all throughout the fall. Now, if that happens, even more movies are not going to get released. All those Oscar bait movies are not going to get released. Your TV shows aren't going to go into production. And they're even talking now, on the television side, why don't we just do like a part season rather than trying to make 24 total episodes and airing them through the summer?
Well, and nobody really talks about who this really hurts. This does not hurt the Tom Cruises. This does not hurt the,
right.
The Rob Lowe's or the it doesn't hurt all the big names. It doesn't hurt any. It's all the character actors. It's the the grips behind the scene and the stage workers and all. Those are the people.
The craft services people, the makeup people, the art people, the wardrobe people. They're going to be hurting, and that is going to be the sad part.
No income for the big
fallout.
No income for 6 months. I mean, good luck. I mean, and quite honestly, I have SAG should create a fund for those people that they could get. I don't know. It's just it's so frustrating. And I understand the actors wanting to protect themselves from AI and animation and deep fake stuff and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, you got to be like, okay, let's be reasonable about this. I don't know. We'll see what happens. All right. But there are still some movies coming out. Let's start with Jamie Foxx, John Boyega, Teyonah Parris, A New Neighborhood Conspiracy. It's a Netflix movie, The Cloned Tyrone.
This is one of my favorite titles to say. They cloned Tyrone. And it's supposed to be kind of a parody of a 60s or 70s blaxploitation film. So Jamie Foxx and John Boyega and Teyonah Parris are these people. They're living in this, just kind of this rundown town where there's just no hope. Jamie Foxx is, as they say, an entrepreneur who has lots of lady employees. Teyonah Parris is one of those employees, and John Boyega is just a drug dealer and a hustler. And they start to realize one night that John Boyega died. Like, he gets killed off. And then he shows up the next day. And they realize there's something afoot in their neighborhood, in their city. And it's going to blow your mind. And basically, I don't want to give it away, but, there are secret nefarious forces behind the scenes that are controlling this town and conducting experiments.
Oh, man.
And, I think it's entertaining. I think, Jamie Foxx and this Teyonah Parris are hilarious because they get all the best lines. They get all the funny things to happen. Boyega, he's doing all right. He's along for the ride. I'm going to say 3 waffles. I think you got a good, solid film here.
All right, good. Well, let's move on to one that I think everybody seems to be talking about, and that is Oppenheimer, the story of how the bomb was made and Oppenheimer's criticism of the work.
Yeah, so hey, you got 3 hours? Because that's how long this movie is. Get ready, yes, and listen, it's a Christopher Nolan movie,
right.
Directed by him, written by him. I mean, the guy is one of the best working directors right now, and so you get this amazing story. It's very it weaves together so many different pieces. I mean, it really kind of starts off with this framing device that Oppenheimer in 1954 is stuck in a hearing because the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission wants to silence him. At this point in his life, he's become very anti-war, very anti-atomic weapon, and he's making these public proclamations, and they're accusing him of being a communist. And so with that framing device, we go back in time. We see him as a student. We see him as this brilliant mind, this guy who realizes that they need to beat the Nazis to the table here because we have to save Western civilization, but also starts to have these worries about what have we done, what have we unleashed upon the world, and so all of that weaved together is so wonderful to watch. His personal tragedies, his personal flaws. Cillian Murphy should be getting an Oscar nomination
Oh
for
yeah.
playing Oppenheimer in this movie. He's amazing. It's just the only thing I think is wrong with the movie is it just kind of loses some steam towards the end. That last hour kind of lags. We get more into the moralizing about it all
Right.
and in his life kind of after the hearing. And I think it slowed down what was really a rocket ship. I'm going to say 3.5 waffles for Oppenheimer.
Cillian Murphy is one of my favorite actors. He, the whole Peaky Blinders thing and everything else, that showed you some range. That guy he's got chops. He is super good. So yeah. All right. Well, Barbie, the movie, we got about a minute and a half or so here. Barbie in theaters. I mean, this thing is like a marketing machine. And I just, I'm never going to watch it, kind of thing. But man, it's gotten some legs, man. Everybody wants a piece of this.
Oh yeah, I think it's going to make a ton of money over the weekend. I think people are going to be surprised at how successful it is because this was the payback movie. I'm not kidding. When I went to see this movie last night, I walked in and there were all sorts of guys there with their girlfriends and with their wives, and you could tell they were there because they owed one to their girlfriends and their wives. And you listen, it's trying to be kind of like this really weird kind of kooky movie where Barbie, played by Margot Robbie, we find out that all the Barbies live in Barbie land, but they're connected to the little girls who play with them out in the real world. And the little girl that owns her Barbie, she's starting to feel sad. She's putting thoughts into our Barbie's heads about existential crisis and what's it like to die and sad feelings. And Barbie can't handle this. And so she's heading off to the real world to try to save that little girl. And Ken's tagging along because, man, he's got it bad for Barbie. But here's the funny part. Ken kind of likes the real world. He kind of likes a male-dominated world.
Ken kind of likes it. All right, -1 to 3 waffles. Where are we at with Barbie, the movie?
I'm at 2.5 waffles. I think it was funny. I think it has moments, but it really, again, another movie that really drags towards the end is they're trying to figure out how are we going to end this thing.
Right. It's a tough deal, but I guess somebody will watch it. It won't be me. I don't think my wife's going to watch. We'll wait for streaming, I guess. All right, Willie Waffle, wafflemovies.com. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week.
Next week, talk about the Haunted Mansion.
The Haunted Mansion from Disney. All right, folks, that's it. We're out of time. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. We'll see you on Monday. Well, we almost ran way over the end on that one.
Sorry.
No, it's timing, babe. I mean, come on, Barbie. It's just like oh man, I don't know.
I'll tell you what gets me. Okay, so like it's a very funny movie, but I feel like it's kind of beaten up on one side a little too much. I understand they want to make this movie that's all about Barbie's impact on women, kind of this cross feeling that on the one hand, Barbie can be an inspiration, as we've seen Barbie become president. We've seen Barbie as an astronaut. We've seen Barbie as a professional, and that can be inspirational. But then, all these young girls who aspire to look like Barbie. Well, Barbie doesn't look real, and so that I can see, and they play a lot with that. They play a lot with the men in this movie, and what is their role in this Barbie world, and are they happy? And what do they really want?
Right.
So I think it gets kind of into that territory where it's not really a toy movie. It's more for adults. It's more for people who are going to get those inside jokes, who are going to understand that debate that's going on. And then Will Ferrell shows up and does a lot of goofy stuff. So hey,
Well,
Excuse me.
you know, I guess, like I said, if we watch it, I'm sure we'll wait for the. I mean, again, I'm waiting for the stream for almost everything. It's crazy.
I know. Well, and it comes to you faster than ever.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that whole, like, what used to be a 1 year window shrunk to 6 months, shrank to 3 months. Now it's like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So, like, if you want to pay for the stream, 6 weeks is all you have to wait,
Yeah.
and then you could rent it video on demand. If
Yeah.
you want to wait till it hits one of the streaming services, yeah, you're a little bit closer to maybe 5 or 6 months, depending on how well the movie did.
Yeah, no, and I expect that, quite honestly, but it's good. I will say a little nudge. I've been kind of following this just out of pure curiosity. I've been watching The Sound of Freedom, which we talked about last week.
Yeah,
I've been watching the box office returns, and
yep,
last weekend, the only thing that beat it was the opening weekend of Mission Impossible. But it beat, so Sound of Freedom was number 2 at 27.2 million. Up 39% from the previous week. They added 313 theaters. It was so popular. It beat out number 3, which was the Red Door. Red Door only did 13 million. It did well over twice what Indiana Jones did in the same, basically the same time frame. I mean, it's just crazy. This movie is really catching fire.
Well, and I'm going to blow your mind here, because yesterday there was an announcement that Sound of Freedom has crossed the $100 million mark.
Yeah. Yep.
That means you're a certified blockbuster in so many ways.
Yeah.
And pre-COVID, $100 million was still impressive, but post-COVID, that's massive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is an amazing achievement, and they've done very well with it. It's in the top 1 or 2 in every chart you look at, weekly, daily, everything else. It's killing it. It is killing it. And I'm hoping maybe this is the perfect storm between the whole SAG-AFTRA thing and the delay and everything else. Maybe this is the perfect opportunity for somebody to say, look at this. Maybe we should look at more movies like this instead of, whatever we're making, kind of thing. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being hopeful.
I think you're being. I don't think you're crazy, because I think over the past like 5 years there have been people in Hollywood who realize that there is an audience for movies that are driven by faith or by morality or whatever you want to call it. And some of these movies have been getting into theaters and surprisingly doing very well, surprisingly to people who don't think much of them. I'm thinking of the Kelsey Grammer movie that came out a few months ago. I'm thinking about this movie. I mean, these things come out, and then everybody is shocked that, oh my God, there are people that want to pay money to see this. Yeah. They've proven it for years and years and years. I feel like we've had this conversation, not just you and me, but just in media. We've had this conversation since basically The Passion of the Christ came out.
Right.
That there is an audience for people who want these types of movies, and the people who provide them are going to do pretty well. Great example. How about the movie Father Stu? That's a wonderful example. With Marky Mark. Just a nice inspirational story about this priest, and they're out there, and people will go see those movies if you make them.
I agree. And I think, my hat's off to people like, for example, Jim Caviezel. Did you know that he lost 2 agents and his attorney over this movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, 2 agents just dropped him. An agent he'd had for 17 years dropped him because he insisted on doing this movie. And then he lost another agent, and then he lost his attorney over the whole deal. And man, I hope he went in for points on this, because he'll be making some bank on this whole deal.
And boy, his next movie, he's going to do all right.
His next movie?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what he's going to sign up for next, but whatever he signs up for next, I think in a lot of ways he's become kind of the poster boy for this movement.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think he's done a very good job. He is a man of faith, and he's put that out there, and he's just had faith that this was the right thing to do. But I mean, when you see people around you that are just like, no, this is not going to go over well in Hollywood. Well, I don't really care if it goes over well in Hollywood. What's going to go over like in Flyover America? What is the average person going to think? And so my hat's off to him. I mean, it really is. He did an amazing job in The Passion of the Christ, and he's actually been good in pretty much everything. I've only ever seen him in half a dozen things, but he is, this looks super good. And I want to go watch it. I haven't seen it yet, but it's on the list. That's all I could say. So,
yeah.
All right. So next week, tease me.
The Haunted Mansion, Disney's big movie that they're doing all these premieres and they don't have any of the stars. And they're one of the first studios that's really struggling in this new world right now, and it'll be curious to see how the Haunted Mansion does.
Yeah. I don't know about Disney and their live action stuff. Sometimes it's good, Maleficent. Sometimes, I just
this one will probably be better because it's not a real life or a real action version of one of their classic cartoons.
Right.
Like, I think that's what this one has going for it. I think, where they suffer is when they're making the live action version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs,
right,
or the
right.
live action version of the Little
Beauty and the
Mermaid.
Beast, or
Those are the ones where they really do. That's where they get a lot of the controversy.
They do,
and that's what they're getting for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs right now.
Yeah, well, they do have a good track record with making movies out of rides. Pirates of the Caribbean, the Jungle. What was the other one with The Rock and Emily Blunt?
Jungle Cruise.
Jungle Cruise. I mean, they've made some movies out of some. So I mean, okay. But we'll have to see. I remember I actually went through the Haunted Mansion when I was a kid. I went to Disneyland when I was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I still remember the Haunted Mansion. So it'll be entertaining to watch, but we'll have to see. So, all right, my friend. Well, any final thoughts here before I kick you to the curb for the day?
No, I'm done. Kick me to the side. I'll see you next week. And everybody just enjoy the weekend.
I'm going to try. It looks like it's going to be sunny. It looks like it's going to be nice. Finally, we're halfway through summer. We've had 3 sunny days in the entire summer. So I'm ready for something new. Thank you, my friend. It's good to talk with you. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Folks, we are out of time. I got to go. Really, I mean it this time. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you on Monday.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.